The plane trembled gently beneath the passengers boarding, as if it too could sense the tension in the air. Leather seats, warm amber lighting, the lingering scent of luxury cologne threading through the narrow aisle. The flight attendant smiled at every traveler until he stepped in. A black man, close to 40, gray button-down shirt, lightweight charcoal coat, crisp tailored trousers, dark leather shoes. He looked neat, composed, but he wore no sparkling watch, no branded briefcase, no platinum card lanyard swinging from his neck, no silver laptop gleaming in his hands like the others. Just a boarding pass folded, smooth, clearly printed Jordan Miles, Seat 1A, Priority 1. The flight attendant didn't smile. She tilted her head, voice coated in something colder than politeness. "Are you sure you're on the right flight? That seat's already taken?" He looked up, not defensive but also not afraid. "Then please check again." The words were calm, but in that single moment, the cabin held its breath. A white businessman in the front row muttered without lifting his gaze. "Guys like him always book the wrong seat. Just look at how he's dressed." No one laughed, but no one objected. No one said a word. Yet someone had already started recording. Before we dive deeper into this story, one of bias, power, and a 7-minute reckoning, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? What city? What country? And have you ever been judged just for how you looked? If you believe every passenger deserves respect, no matter what they wear or how they show up, tap that subscribe button, share this video, and join us here at Racist Exposed, where the truth doesn't need a suit to be heard. Now, back to the moment where it all began. 7 minutes before Jordan Miles revealed who he really was, and just 3 minutes before one flight attendant accidentally ended her own career with one false assumption. The moment Jordan Miles stepped into the first-class cabin, the air changed not with noise, but with silence. He moved with quiet confidence, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that has long outgrown the need for it. He carried no briefcase, no oversized luxury brand logos, only a soft leather carry-on and a folded navy coat draped over one arm. Passengers turned subtly. Their eyes moved, but their heads didn't, just enough to notice, just enough to measure. He paused briefly in the aisle, glanced at his boarding pass, then looked up towards Seat 1A. It was at the front left corner, by the window, already prepared with champagne and a hot towel folded on a porcelain dish. He stepped forward 2 clean, composed steps. Then a hand appeared, blocking his way. "Sir," the flight attendant's voice sliced through the ambient hush like a paper cut. "I believe you're in the wrong section. May I see your boarding pass?" Her name badge read S. Harlow. Her smile was missing, but her tone tried to mimic customer service. Jordan handed over his pass without a word. She barely glanced at it. "This seat is reserved for Priority 1 passengers," she said. He didn't flinch. "That's me." Her lips tightened, her fingers now gripping the tablet clutched in her other hand. She tapped, swiped, waited, then frowned. "I'm not seeing your name in the manifest." A man across the aisle, older, white, with a navy suit and a coffee cup, leaned in, just enough to be heard. "Probably bought it secondhand. They sell those online sometimes." Jordan turned slightly, made eye contact, not with aggression, with restraint, with history. And just as calmly, he replied, "This ticket was issued by the airline, through a direct corporate channel. Nothing about it is secondhand." The attendant's expression didn't change, but her stance shifted, more guarded now, more skeptical. "I'll have to double-check," she said, tone firm. "Until then, I can't allow you to take that seat." Another silence followed, thicker than before. Jordan didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he placed his coat neatly over the arm of Seat 1A, stood beside it, and said, "Then please check, again." And this time, he wasn't the only one waiting for the truth. Jordan didn't sit down. He stood beside his seat like a calm protest, his back straight, his expression unreadable. He wasn't here to perform. He was here to be treated like any other passenger in seat 1A. But of course, he wasn't like any other passenger. He was black. And in first class, that still seemed to mean something. Flight Attendant S. Harlow tapped her tablet again, harder this time. The screen refreshed. Still no change. A second attendant, male, approached. His badge read, Miles K. He was younger, hesitant, unsure whether to take charge or stand back. What's the issue? He asked quietly, eyes flicking between Jordan and Harlow. He's not on the manifest. She said, low but clipped. Tablet isn't showing his name for 1A. Jordan's voice came, smooth and steady. That's because your system hasn't updated. Check the paper manifest, or call gate operations. Harlow stiffened. Sir, we follow protocol. He nodded, then follow it, fully, not halfway. The man in the navy suit across the aisle, who had been sipping his coffee with smug familiarity, raised his voice again. This is ridiculous. If he was supposed to be in that seat, the system would show it. Simple. And then, turning to Jordan. Look, man, this isn't personal, but you can't expect people to bend the rules just because. He trailed off, as if realizing the sentence had revealed more than he meant. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Just because what? The cabin felt colder. Before the man could answer, another voice broke in, this time from 2 rows behind. A young black woman in a professional blazer leaned forward, her phone angled slightly upward. Her expression was unreadable. Just letting you all know, she said clearly. I've been recording since the first wrong section comment. Harlow turned sharply. Ma'am, that's not permitted on board. And neither is racial profiling, she replied. The man in the navy suit chuckled, but the sound was hollow. No one echoed it. Jordan looked at the woman, gave her a subtle nod. Then, once more, turned to the crew. You have my boarding pass. You have my name. Now check your facts, because if you don't, I will. There's a silence that doesn't beg to be broken. It hovers, heavy. A silence not of peace, but of pressure. That's the kind of silence that filled the first-class cabin. Jordan stood still, deliberate, unwavering. He didn't tap his foot. He didn't check his watch. He gave them space to make the right decision. And they did what people often do in such moments. They hesitated. Then, they deflected. Harlow glanced at her fellow attendant. Let's just call gate services. Maybe it's a sync issue. But she said it like a formality, like she already knew it wouldn't help. Jordan remained silent, watching. The man across the aisle, the one in the navy suit, shifted in his seat and muttered under his breath. This whole thing's becoming a performance. Jordan turned slightly. I didn't perform, he said quietly. I showed up. You decided the role. From behind him, the young black woman added, and I've got the whole scene. Her name, as Jordan would later learn, was Tiana Rhodes, a policy journalist en route to Debussy. Her voice was steady, and her phone still recording. Sir, Harlow said, her voice a notch tighter now, I'm going to need you to step aside so we can allow others to board. Jordan didn't move. He looked her in the eye, calm as ever. No, I'll wait right here, until the system catches up to the truth. At that moment, another figure appeared in the aisle, a man in a black vest and headset, approaching from the jet bridge. He introduced himself with a clipped nod. Mark Jacobson, Senior Ground Liaison. Heard there's a boarding discrepancy. Harlow handed him the tablet. Seat 1A isn't confirmed. Passenger claims priority clearance, but it's not reflected. Mark tapped the screen, brow furrowed. This model's running legacy sync. Manual updates from HQ can lag up to 15 minutes. What time was this ticket scanned? 7 minutes ago, Jordan answered. Mark looked up, his eyes narrowing. Name. Jordan Miles. Mark blinked. Then he stared. Then he checked the screen again, then the name, then the screen. And his voice softened. Just slightly. I need to make a call. Excuse me. He stepped away, already dialing. Tiana zoomed in slightly with her phone. and Jordan stepped closer to seat 1A, placed one hand on the headrest, and waited. Not as a guest, but as someone who had built the house and was now being asked to wait outside. When Mark Jacobson returned from the call, his pace had changed. He walked slower, more carefully, as if the floor beneath him had started to matter. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked at Jordan with something new in his eyes. Not recognition, not apology, calculation. "Mr. Miles," he began, "we're working to resolve this as quickly as possible. It appears there was an internal override on your check-in status, possibly triggered by a manual verification flag." Triggered by what Jordan asked, his voice still calm, almost too calm. Mark hesitated. "We're not sure yet, but these flags can sometimes be applied if a check-in is incomplete, or if a gate agent notices a mismatch." Tiana spoke from her seat, loud enough for the row to hear. "A mismatch between what, the clothes and the cabin?" Mark didn't respond. Jordan did. "I completed check-in through a direct channel. There was no mismatch unless someone created one." The air inside the cabin thickened. Flight attendant Harlow stepped forward again, her tone clipped, composed. "Sir, we're trying to assist you, but you're making this difficult." Jordan turned to her, his voice smooth but edged with something colder. "No, I'm making it visible." She blinked. "I'm not the one who forgot how to ask for ID before making an assumption." Mark Jacobson's jaw tightened. He was used to glitches, to complaints, to irate flyers demanding upgrades. But this wasn't that. This was different. This man wasn't confused. He was watching, listening, collecting. "I'll escalate to Central Services," Mark said, already backing away. "They'll be able to validate the scan logs directly." "Good," Jordan replied. "And while they do, I'll stay right here in front of the seat I paid for." He didn't need to raise his voice. The power was in how little he had to say. Harlow crossed her arms. "You're obstructing the boarding process." "No," Jordan said. "Your assumptions are—" A few passengers behind them exchanged glances. One man whispered something into his wife's ear. She didn't smile. The second flight attendant, Miles, hovered near the curtain to the galley, clearly unsure whose side to stand on, protocol or conscience. "Would you like a beverage while you wait, sir?" he finally asked Jordan, hesitant. Harlow turned sharply. "We haven't confirmed the seat." Jordan looked at Miles, then at Harlow. "This isn't about confirmation. It's about comfort. And I think we're both clear on whose comfort you're prioritizing." Harlow stepped back, but said nothing. From 2C, Tiana's voice floated forward again. "Funny how calm he's been this whole time. And yet somehow, he's still the problem." Jordan didn't turn. He didn't need to. Everything they needed to hear had already been said. The call came in 4 minutes later. Mark answered his headset discreetly, but Tiana's camera was still recording. The shift in his posture, the tension in his brow said more than the conversation ever could. He lowered his mic and cleared his throat. "Mr. Miles, we've just received confirmation. You are, in fact, registered as Priority 1. Seat 1A is yours." Harlow blinked once. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Jordan remained still. He didn't sigh in relief. He didn't move to sit. He simply asked, "And the override?" Mark hesitated. "It was manually triggered by a crew member. It flagged your ticket for secondary verification." Jordan nodded slowly, absorbing the answer. His voice remained quiet. "So, the system worked. The human input didn't." Mark didn't respond. Tiana did. "So what happens now?" "You just tell him sorry and serve champagne like nothing happened." Harlow finally spoke, her tone tighter than before. "We're trying to de-escalate the situation." Jordan looked at her, directly, calmly. "No, you're trying to contain it." "Escalation didn't start with me. It started when I walked in and you decided who I wasn't." Silence. No protocol had prepared her for that. Across the aisle, the man in the navy suit had gone quiet. Even his coffee sat untouched. Mark turned to Harlow. "We'll speak in the galley. Now." As they stepped away, Jordan finally sat down in seat 1A, not with triumph, but with precision. And for the first time since boarding began, the cabin exhaled. But it wasn't over. Because the seat had been given. Now. The question was how much had already been taken. Seat 1A cradled him like it never doubted him even when everyone else had. Jordan leaned back, legs crossed at the ankle, fingers resting on the armrest. His eyes didn't scan the cabin. They settled on silence, on memory, on what had almost repeated itself. Again. Tiana leaned forward from 2C. Do they know who you are? Jordan's lips curved, just barely. Not yet. The second flight attendant, Miles, returned with a silver tray. Would you like something to drink, Mr. Miles? Jordan took a pause, not because he needed one, but because the moment did. Sparkling water, no lemon. Right away. He turned and disappeared into the galley. Across the aisle, the man in the navy suit shifted again. Something about him had dulled not just his voice, but his certainty. He pulled out his phone but didn't unlock it. He was watching now. Jordan unfolded his leather ID wallet and laid it gently beside his boarding pass on the armrest. A white card with embossed text shimmered under the light. Tiana glanced over. She blinked once, then smiled to herself. Of course. The ID read Jordan Miles, Executive Technology Advisor, Aero West Global Holdings Board Liaison, Aviation Data Integrity. He didn't raise it, didn't flash it like a badge. He simply let it breathe. The same system that tried to reject his name, he helped design it. The same boarding software that flagged him for removal, he'd written its architecture. He wasn't just a passenger, he was the blueprint. And for the first time since takeoff procedures began, Jordan wasn't the one being scanned. Jordan didn't need to announce anything. The silence was doing it for him. The ID sat there unraised, unflinching like a quiet rebellion against every moment someone had ever said, "You don't belong." Tiana leaned forward again, her voice low but clear. "You've done this before." Jordan's eyes didn't move from the window. "I've lived this before." He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired. Tired in the way people get when the same wound keeps reopening in different clothes. At 26, he continued, I was denied lounge access after a keynote I gave because I came in wearing travel sneakers. The receptionist asked where my boss was. "And what did you do?" Tiana asked. Jordan turned to her, just a little. "I bought equity in the company that owned the lounge." A beat. He wasn't boasting, he was reporting. Tiana looked down at her phone. "I hope you don't mind me filming, I don't want them to change the story later." Jordan gave a faint nod. Stories change when there's no record. You're doing the right thing. From behind them, another passenger finally spoke. A woman in 3A. Quiet until now. "Excuse me," she said, carefully. "I just wanted to say, I saw the way she spoke to you, and I'm sorry." Jordan looked at her, really looked. A white woman in her 60s, pearls at her collar, hands folded like she'd been debating this moment for the last 10 minutes. "Thank you," he said, "but I'm not here for apologies. I'm here for acknowledgement." And in that moment, the cabin shifted again, not in sound, but in gravity. Because the man who once walked in unnoticed was now the only presence they couldn't ignore. The sound of wheels on tile echoed softly as Mark Jacobson returned from the galley, walking with the stiffness of someone who'd been corrected. He approached seat 1A with a paper in his hand, the printed manifest. "Mr. Miles," he said, his voice now wrapped in something between respect and apprehension. "The system has updated. You're officially cleared. Seat 1A was and is yours." Jordan didn't blink. "I was never unclear?" Mark offered the paper, but Jordan didn't take it. "Was there a note on why the override was flagged?" Mark hesitated. Harlow had reappeared beside him, arms tight across her chest, face blank. "It was marked for manual re-verification," Mark said carefully. "No reason listed, just a manual flag." Tiana, from her seat, muttered, Translation: someone thought he didn't look the part. Jordan tilted his head. Manual flags require a reason, even if unwritten. Harlow broke her silence. We're trained to watch for inconsistencies, unusual boarding behavior, mismatched profiles. And what exactly about me was inconsistent? Jordan asked, voice still soft. She didn't answer. But Mark did, quietly. We have internal cues, informal. Some crew interpret them as signs, bag styles, body language, even attire. And those cues tend to point in one direction. Mark didn't respond. Tiana spoke for him. Black, unbranded, unbothered. The words hung in the air like vapor on a cold window, barely visible, but fully there. Jordan looked between them, his voice steady. You didn't see a risk. You saw a rule being broken, one that was never written, but always enforced. And this time, Harlow didn't argue. Because now the camera was rolling, the seat was claimed, and the silence was no longer on her side. The cabin door hadn't closed, but it might as well have. The mood had. What started as a misunderstanding now sat heavy like unclaimed luggage in the aisle. Passengers weren't whispering anymore. They were watching. Mark turned to Harlow. We'll need to submit a statement after landing. Everything has to be documented now. Harlow's jaw twitched. I followed what we were trained to do. Jordan spoke without turning. Then your training was flawed. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me. Jordan looked at her, calm, precise. You were trained to trust your instincts, but no one ever taught you what your instincts were built from. Silence. Then, the cabin intercom buzzed faintly. Harlow stepped away, answering. Her voice was hushed, clipped. When she returned, her tone had shifted. Security has been alerted. We've requested ground support at the gate. Mark's head turned. Why? Harlow didn't answer him. She looked at Jordan. In case we need assistance with removal. A breath caught in the cabin. Not from Jordan. Not from Tiana. But from the woman in 3A. You're still doing this? She whispered, half to herself. Jordan stood slowly, not suddenly, not as a threat, as a statement. So, after everything, the decision is to double down. Not correct, just contain. Mark stammered, I didn't authorize that. This isn't necessary. Jordan held up a hand. Let it happen. Because this time, I'm not just going to walk away. And just as he said that, his assistant Mateo stepped quietly into the cabin from the jet bridge, phone already in hand. Sir, he said, timestamp is live. Legal has eyes on the stream. Jordan nodded once, then turned back to Harlow. You called for backup. Now I'm calling it what it is. The soft ding of the intercom echoed again. But this time, no one moved, no one breathed. Mateo stood by the bulkhead, phone lifted, recording silently. Behind him, a gate agent hovered in the doorway, uncertain whether to enter. Jordan remained still. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence had already organized the room. Tiana spoke next, steady and sharp. Just to be clear, you've now called security on a Priority 1 passenger after admitting the system had updated, after confirming his identity, and after being told the ticket was valid. Harlow snapped, This is a safety protocol. Jordan's tone dropped a register calm, deep, irreversible. No, this is retaliation, and I suggest you stop before it becomes evidence. Harlow's eyes flashed, but she didn't answer. The man in the navy suit shifted again. He looked like he wanted to disappear into his collar. The woman in 3A spoke louder this time. You know what's wild? If he had yelled or caused a scene, I'd still be sitting here thinking he was the problem. But he didn't. He's been calm. You're the ones unraveling. A few other passengers nodded. One man muttered, They're not even hiding it anymore. Mark looked at Harlow. Call it off. Now. Before this gets worse. But Mateo had already stepped forward. Too late. He turned the phone toward Jordan and spoke clearly. Corporate confirmed. Mr. Miles holds senior advisory privileges. Full legal oversight. He's not just a passenger. He's a stakeholder. Jordan turned slightly toward the front of the cabin. eyes scanning the faces now frozen in realization. So, let's all ask again. What exactly was I removed for? For a moment, no one moved. Even the engine's outside distant rumbling seemed to pause. The word stakeholder hadn't just changed the room. It had flipped the hierarchy. Mark slowly lowered his headset. His eyes searched Harlow's, as if looking for some rationale, some lifeline. There was none. Jordan didn't look angry. He looked resolved, like a man who'd waited long enough to let someone else speak first. I asked, he repeated, what exactly I was removed for. Harlow opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. There was a procedural concern, she said finally. You didn't present ID right away. You matched a caution profile. Tiana cut in, cold and sharp. Caution profile. You mean black man, dressed plainly, traveling alone. That profile. Silence. Mark whispered. This isn't how we want to represent the company. Jordan turned to him. But it is how the company trained her to act. Let's not pretend this was improvised. Harlow's face flushed. We were told unofficially to watch for inconsistencies. Attire, luggage, boarding behavior. We flag it if it doesn't match the seat. And what about the ones who never get flagged? Jordan asked. What about the men who wear hoodies but look like they belong because they're not me? Harlow didn't answer. Jordan stepped forward, not aggressively, but deliberately. He turned to the rest of the cabin. I'm not here to punish anyone. But let's be very clear. What happened here didn't start with a glitch. It started with a glance. He sat back down in seat 1A, this time slower, more final. And for once, the consequences won't be flying past unnoticed. The seat beneath him was quiet now. But Jordan's mind wasn't. He leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the hushed clicks of buckles, murmurs of delayed boarding, and the now familiar whisper of his own restraint. He had sat in seat 1A before, not just today, not just on this flight, but in conference rooms where no one looked at him twice until his name appeared on the contract. In board meetings where he was assumed to be tech support until the strategy he designed turned into profit. And once, on another flight, when a gate agent glanced at his boarding pass, then at his face, and said, Sir, packages go through freight. This is the priority lane. He had said nothing that day, just stepped back, walked to a corner, and waited until someone else stepped up and saw the mistake. But it hadn't been a mistake. It had been a judgment, one made not by data but by assumption. And he'd learned early, the louder you defend your place, the more they assume you don't belong there. So Jordan stopped defending and started building. Built systems, built policies, built companies where silence wouldn't be mistaken for guilt, only discipline. Now years later, he sat in seat 1A again. Not to be seen, but to see who still refused to look. The difference? This time, the silence didn't belong to him. It belonged to the people who had just learned exactly who they were speaking to. Mateo's voice came quietly from behind the curtain. Corporate confirmed your escalation. Legal's looped in. They flagged this incident for immediate review. Jordan didn't nod. He didn't react. He simply took a breath, the kind you take when you've waited years to be believed. He looked to his right, where the navy-suited man still sat stiffly, eyes down, phone idle. I never said you couldn't be here, the man muttered. Jordan didn't look at him. But you implied it, with a glance, a sentence, a silence. You wanted the privilege of judgment without the burden of being called out for it. The man said nothing. Tiana turned her phone toward him. You still think he doesn't belong. He turned his face to the window. Across the cabin, the woman in 3A spoke up again. You know what I find strange? No one ever second-guesses a white man in a hoodie. But put a black man in slacks, give him a ticket, and suddenly it's an investigation. No one responded, because no one could. Harlow returned with a tablet in hand, not the glitchy one. A new device, freshly synced. She approached Jordan, but didn't meet his eyes. We've updated the system. You're fully cleared. Your loyalty status has been noted. Jordan looked at the screen, then at her. I didn't need validation. I needed recognition, and you still haven't said the words. Harlow's jaw tightened. She looked around the cabin, then back at him. I misjudged. I flagged your name because I assumed something that wasn't true. Tiana raised the phone higher. Jordan's voice remained measured. Assumptions are accidents once. Patterns are policy. And somewhere deep in the system, that policy had just been exposed. Mateo stepped forward, phone still recording. He spoke clearly, deliberately. Timestamp, 8:14 a.m. Verbal admission by crew of discriminatory profiling based on appearance. Passenger credentials confirmed. Removal protocol invalid. Harlow's face drained of color. The moment wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Jordan finally reached into the side pocket of his carry-on. From it, he retrieved a slim folder navy blue, embossed with silver. He laid it flat on the tray table, opened it, and pulled out a document. A single page, signed, dated. He turned it toward Harlow and Mark. It read Advisory Authorization, Executive Oversight Privileges. Skylight Airlines, Data and Ethics Division. Below that, Jordan Miles, Active Status Authority Level Executive Discretion. Mark swallowed hard. Sir, if I may. Jordan raised a hand. You may not. For too long, this airline, like too many others, has hidden behind isolated incidents. But this wasn't isolated. It was routine, until today. He folded the document and tucked it away. Then he looked directly at Harlow. Effective immediately, you're relieved of all passenger-facing duties. You'll be debriefed upon landing. Harlow stepped back, blinking. Tiana's camera never flinched. You can't fire me, Harlow said, voice cracking. Jordan's tone didn't shift. I'm not firing you. I'm documenting your choices. What comes next is accountability, not punishment. And that difference is what separates us. He turned back to Mateo. Send it through legal. Full report. Include the footage. Mateo nodded. And with that, the power shifted permanently. From accusation to acknowledgement. From silence to system change. The cabin didn't buzz. It quieted. Not the comfortable quiet of takeoff, but the kind that comes after something sacred has been broken open. Jordan remained seated, eyes forward, posture steady. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't need to. Now, they were looking at him. Mateo tapped his phone, signaling the recording had been uploaded. Legal had acknowledged the receipt. A copy of the footage was now secured, time-stamped, and cross-referenced to Jordan's authority. The system couldn't unsee what it had seen. Mark stood near the bulkhead, hands folded, saying nothing, the kind of nothing that follows complicity. And then, it happened. A quiet voice from the back of first class. Sir, it was the other flight attendant, Miles. He stepped forward, eyes lowered, but voice clear. I just want to say, I knew who you were when I saw your name, but I didn't speak up. Jordan looked at him, not with anger, with inquiry. Why not? Miles hesitated. Because we were trained to let lead crew handle conflict, even when it doesn't feel right. Jordan waited. And he said, Miles glanced toward Harlow's empty station. And I was afraid if I contradicted her, I'd be written up. Lose root privileges, miss promotions. That's how it works here. Tiana leaned slightly. Phone still recording. So you all just stay silent. Miles nodded once. Yes, and we call it professionalism. Jordan nodded slowly. Then let's call it something else now. Let's call it what it really is, protection of comfort over correction of harm. The words hung in the cabin. And in that moment, more than one silence began to crack. The plane still hadn't left the gate, but something else was taking off. Courage. Tiana lowered her phone slightly and said aloud, I've flown this route 4 times in the last year. I've seen things like this happen twice. Both times to black men. She looked around the cabin. Neither raised their voice. Both were asked to step aside while we verify. One was wearing a tailored coat. The other had a briefcase. Neither stayed in first class. No one interrupted. The woman in 3A, quiet until now, added, "My husband was flagged once, just for standing near the priority line before it opened. We laughed about it afterward, but it wasn't funny." Her voice softened. It was just easier to pretend it didn't mean anything. Jordan turned his head slightly toward her. "And now?" She met his eyes. "Now I see it meant everything." Mark finally spoke from near the galley. His voice was stiff, but his words felt honest. "There have been other complaints about this kind of treatment, but they were logged as customer confusion, miscommunication, never as profiling." Jordan's eyes didn't blink, because if you name it, you have to confront it. Mark nodded once, slowly. "And if you confront it, someone has to answer for it." Mateo stepped beside Jordan. "We're not just answering, we're auditing every miscommunication in the last 12 months. Everyone that looks like this." Mark's eyes flicked toward the back of the cabin, toward the other crew still watching. "Then you'd better prepare. There'll be more." And now, for the first time since Jordan boarded, truth wasn't something carried in silence. It was spoken. The cabin remained suspended, not in tension now, but in recalibration. Jordan didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply reached into his carry-on once more and pulled out a second folder thicker than the first. He handed it to Mateo. "Distribute it after landing. Hard copy for internal review. Digital for the executive board." Tiana leaned forward. "What is it?" Jordan met her gaze, steady and clear. "It's the first draft of a new crew accountability system. Real-time passenger flag tracking, complaint logs that can't be deleted, bias markers, anonymous whistleblower channels, mandatory retraining modules." Mateo added, "We're calling it the Skylens Protocol." Mark blinked. "That's already developed." Jordan nodded. "I designed it 6 months ago. I was waiting for the right moment to propose it." He looked down at his boarding pass, then back at Harlow's empty station. "Apparently, that moment found me." The woman in 3A whispered, "You came prepared." Jordan didn't smile. "I came exhausted." Prepared was the only way left to travel. Tiana lifted her phone again. "People need to hear that." "Then let them," he said. "But make sure they hear this too. I'm not the exception. I'm just the one who finally had the authority to say enough out loud." The silence that followed wasn't fearful. It was intentional. It was the kind of silence that comes when something old has finally been buried, and something new is about to take flight. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as final boarding closed. It should have been the moment everything settled. Instead, it was when someone stood up. From the front bulkhead, the man in the navy suit finally rose. He hadn't spoken since the first snide remark, but now, as Jordan sat firm and the cabin listened differently, he couldn't stay quiet. "Look, this has gone far enough," he said, voice raised just enough to carry. "This is a flight, not a courtroom." Tiana didn't even lift her phone this time. She just said, "No one asked for a trial. But when bias shows up, sometimes the truth does too." The man scoffed. "It's always the same. You people turn every misunderstanding into a spectacle." Jordan didn't flinch. He didn't even turn. He just said, "You people." 2 words, spoken so softly, they hit like a siren. The man continued, undeterred. "You walk in here like you're owed something just because the world didn't hand it to you easy." And now Jordan did turn. "No, I walk in here like I paid for something. And I don't expect it to be taken away because someone like you doesn't like how I look in the seat." The man bristled. "This whole show, it's performative. If you really had power, you wouldn't need the cameras. You'd just handle it quietly." Jordan's reply came evenly. "The power isn't in the camera. It's in the fact that for once, everyone's watching what normally gets ignored. Even you." The man sat down, not because he agreed, but because there was nowhere left to stand. Not with the whole cabin listening. Not anymore. The man in the navy suit didn't speak again. Not because he was silenced, because he'd finally heard himself. Jordan turned away slowly, letting the moment settle not like a punishment, but like a mirror placed in the center of the cabin. Across the aisle, Mark Jacobson leaned against the galley wall, the weight of implication now fully pressing against his uniform. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Miles, I want to formally apologize on behalf of the crew and the gate team." Jordan didn't respond immediately. Then, "Don't apologize for them. Apologize for the system that taught them this was normal." Mark hesitated. "Then I'll say this: the system was broken before today, and I think you've just given us a way to name it." Tiana, still recording, added quietly, "That's the thing about naming. Once you name something, you can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore." Jordan turned toward her, voice low. "That's why they always want to talk around it. Call it confusion, call it a flag, call it anything but what it is. Because the moment you say the word racist, it becomes real." The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed. And for the first time, no one flinched when it did. A crew member near the jump seat murmured, "He's not wrong." Mateo stepped closer, his voice even. "Timestamp logged. Formal acknowledgement of racial profiling by omission and protocol misuse." Mark looked down. Jordan looked forward. Seat 1A never looked more deserved. Not because it was earned, but because it was defended without shouting, without violence, without apology. Just by showing up and refusing to step aside. The intercom dinged. A flight deck voice came through, level and polite cabin crew. "Prepare for takeoff. Final cross-check." It was the most ordinary announcement in the world. And yet, in this cabin, after everything, it felt like something had shifted, like a chapter had ended, or begun. Jordan remained still, one hand resting on the folded boarding pass beside him. He didn't need it anymore. But he left it visible. A quiet reminder. The seat hadn't been gifted. It had been questioned, then earned again. Across the aisle, the man in the navy suit pulled out his phone and opened his email. He wasn't scrolling. He was reading, like someone realizing how fragile credibility could be when silence wasn't guaranteed. Mateo leaned over and whispered, "Compliance just pinged back. Legal wants your internal notes. The Skylens protocol is moving into expedited review." Jordan gave a single nod. "Send the draft. Let them see it without edits. Let them know this isn't PR. This is reform." From the back of the cabin, a quiet voice called out. It was a younger crew member, barely older than a trainee. "Mr. Miles, I just want to say, I've been scared to speak up about things like this. I didn't know we were allowed to." Jordan turned slightly in his seat. "You weren't, but now you are." The young man straightened, not with confidence but with possibility. Tiana captured the exchange silently, not for clicks, not for fame, for record. Because when someone powerful stays silent, the system survives. But when they speak calmly, clearly the system answers. The plane lifted into the sky, smooth, deliberate. But the real altitude was inside the cabin. No one spoke now, not because they were afraid, because they were listening. Jordan looked out the window, not to escape but to reflect. Clouds moved past like timelines. Every layer of silence he'd carried from lounges to boardrooms to boarding gates floated there. And still he sat, still, quiet, present. Seat 1A had never felt more symbolic, not for status, not even for victory, but for recognition. Mateo opened his laptop and whispered, "Skylens is live on the internal server. We've already received 3 flagged incidents from other routes, words traveling faster than the flight." Jordan nodded once. "Good. Let it reach every terminal before I do." Tiana leaned across the aisle, her voice no longer curious but grounded. "You didn't just hold your seat. You rewrote what it means to earn one." Jordan looked at her, and for the first time, his voice softened. "I didn't come here to change anything. I came here to fly. But when the same turbulence follows you from gate to gate, eventually, you stop blaming the wind." Behind them, the young crew member, the one who had spoken up, adjusted his posture at the galley wall, not with fear, but with purpose. Mark stood farther back, reviewing the printed manifest one more time. Not because he had to, but because now he wanted to get it right. And somewhere in the rows behind them, the man in the navy suit closed his phone. No rebuttal, no defense, only silence, the kind that comes when the old way no longer flies. Cruising altitude brought calm to most cabins. But not this one. In this cabin, a culture had shifted mid-air. The Skylens protocol wasn't a document anymore, it was a promise. Crew members behind the curtain had stopped whispering. They weren't afraid. They were recalibrating, realizing that authority could coexist with accountability. And that maybe, for the first time, being silent wasn't the safest thing to be. Tiana clicked her phone screen off. She hadn't uploaded anything yet. She didn't need to. She knew the moment she would, and it would be after Jordan said it was time. Mateo turned to Jordan. "We've got 3 gate agents asking for immediate access to the training module." One of them said, and I quote, "I've flagged people like this before. I didn't think twice. Now I can't stop thinking about it." Jordan looked straight ahead. "Then we're already making progress." He didn't mean the software. He meant the mirror. Because that's what this had become. Not a confrontation, a reflection. Of who gets doubted, of who gets believed, of who gets to be wrong without consequence and who gets labeled a problem for simply showing up. The woman in 3A tapped lightly on the aisle seat next to her. "Mr. Miles," she said gently, "I've flown this airline for years. I've sat in every row, watched every kind of injustice pass by unspoken. I want you to know." She paused, eyes soft but clear. "Today, I didn't see a disturbance. I saw a correction." Jordan offered the slightest nod. "So did I." Outside, the clouds parted like curtains. And inside, a system that once hid behind politeness was finally being seen for what it really was. The plane began its descent. Outside the window, the city below unfolded small lights, quiet neighborhoods, lives continuing without knowing a single seat in first class had just changed the altitude of something larger. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "We'll be landing shortly at Washington National. Welcome, and thank you for flying with us." No turbulence. But in row 1, a reckoning had already landed. Jordan gathered his things slowly, the folder, the pass, the pen he'd used to annotate silence into structure. He moved without haste, without pause. Mateo leaned in. "Corporate wants to debrief tonight. Legal confirmed. HR too." Jordan didn't answer right away. Then, "Let them wait. We've already said what needed to be said where it mattered most." Behind him, Harlow sat in the crew jump seat, posture tight, headset off. She didn't speak. She hadn't since the order was given. But she heard everything. She saw everything. And that was enough for now. The wheels touched down. The cabin stirred with the usual choreography, belts clicking, phones lighting up, jackets pulled from overhead bins. But this time, it was quieter, more intentional. As passengers stood, they nodded toward Jordan, not in apology, but in acknowledgement. Tiana paused near his row. "I've covered 100 hearings on corporate diversity. None of them taught me as much as watching you in this seat." Jordan smiled gently. "Sometimes, the seat isn't just a seat. It's a test of who we let stay, and who we try to move out before we even know their name." She nodded and walked away. Jordan remained seated a moment longer, not because he had to, but because he could. And this time, no one asked him to move. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.